the next topic that we're going to talk about, and have you again work along as we do this so you can make it work on yours, is we're going to talk about position and what the position property does. So I'm going to start with this image, and I'm going to set the position to static. Now this is actually called non-positioned. It's the default, and that's what it's already set. So adding it here doesn't add any value. I just want to list it so you see what that looks like and what it means. And you see that no change there. The image in it, the position it's in, is just where it is normally would be. And so we don't see any change there. And again, when it's position static, that's considered non-positioned. Another position is relative. So let's go ahead and do this one and see what relative positioning does. Now, a relative position, if we just set it and don't give it any other properties, it doesn't change at all. So what we have to do is we have to then, after we set it to relative, is we need to identify how far off of the left, top, right, or bottom we want it to be. And you can move it in two directions or just one. So let's go ahead and say we want to move it off of the left some. Let's just move it off of the left. Let's do 50 pixels. And let's move it off of the top. Oh, you need to have a colon there. And move it off of the top. Let's just do 30 pixels and see what happens. Okay, so now some things to notice. It moved it from the left 50 pixels. It moved it from the top 30 pixels. Now this is from where it was. So it's relative where its normal position would be. And let me take that back so you can see the difference. Okay, so this is where it normally would be, is right there. Okay, and notice how everything, I want you to see that this space for it stays open even if we move this way away. So let's go ahead and move this way away. Let's move the left 240 pixels, and let's move the top 60 pixels. And refresh. Okay, so it took it from right here where it was, and it moved it from the left 240 pixels and from the top 60. And you see it sitting there, and everything else stayed in place. So these paragraphs are exactly where they were when we started. So we can move this all over. It maintains the original space, and it doesn't move anything around. So if I did the top 160, see how it just covers things up? It just moves where it doesn't belong. It just moves it to a different location. Now watch what happens when I change these. These numbers are kind of, if I change this to bottom, what it's going to do is going to move it from its original place and make a distance from the bottom. It's going to go a distance from the bottom. So there it went 160 pixels from the bottom and still 240 from the left. Okay, so that's what relative does. Let's move that so it's not. Okay, so now you can see it moved it 240 from the left, 160, not 160, but 60 from the bottom. And that's where it is. That's what relative does. The next value we're going to try for position is fixed. So we're going to use this interrogation picture and set the position to fixed. When we do that and refresh, whoa, it's gone. Let's see if we can find it. Nope, it's just gone. So with fixed, we need to have properties like with relative from the top, left, bottom, right properties, but they're different. Number one, they're required to have it work well, but they're based on the viewport. So the viewport is the part of the view, the place where you view the web page. So it's going to be this whole rectangle is the viewport. And when we put a property, it's going to say based on the viewport, move from the top, and let's move from the top 240 pixels and see what we get. Oh, I forgot a colon there. Let's get that in there. That won't work without it. Okay, refresh. And there it is. So now it's moving it from the top 240 pixels. And notice when we move the page itself, it doesn't change because where it's located is based on the viewport, and the viewport isn't changing. The page is moving through the viewport, but the viewport itself is not changing. I can also say move it from the left, and let's move it from the left 60 pixels, and there we have it. Okay, another thing that you can do, notice it just stays based on that viewport. This is a fixed position. Another choice that you can make is whether you want it to be on top of the other elements or behind. And the way that you do that is with the Z index. So I can set the Z index. The smaller the Z index, the further back it goes. So right now it's just set at a basic 1. So let's go ahead and put a negative Z index here. And that will make it less than all the others default. And so now it's behind. Notice how it can be hidden all the way by that image, but it's behind. So we have the choice to make it on top of or behind. So let's go ahead and say that we want it to be on top of them. So I'm going to be on top. I'm going to add a positive number to put it on top and make sure that it stays on top. And let's move it up here to this top right corner. Let's say I want it all the way in this corner. That means I want it off the top 0. So I'm going to say 0 off the top and 0 off the left. And save that and refresh. Oh, off the left. I want it off the right. There, it did it off the left. I want it off the right. There you go. It's kind of backwards the way they do it, but it's how far away from the right side you want it to be. Now I've got a little bit of space there. What this is that's that 15 pixel margin that we have all around. So I'm going to take that off because I want it to really be there. So I'm going to do margin right. And I'm going to set it to 0. Remember, when you're using 0, you don't need to have a unit. There we go. Now I've got it off of the top 0, off of the right 0, and I've eliminated the margin so it bumps right up against there. I've done the Z index so it's going to stay on top. So as we scroll down or up, that's going to just stay on the top. And it's fixed, is positioned in the viewport. The last position property that we're going to do is the absolute. So absolute position, here we'll do this to this last one. And we're talking about this picture here, and when I refresh it, it doesn't do, oh, look, it did do something. When it's absolute, notice how it's lifted out of place. That's another thing to note. When we use fixed, notice it was lifted out of place and its place was not saved. So relative is the only one that saves its space, but the fixed does not save its space, and neither does the absolute. So absolute also uses top right and that, but its position is based on the position on the element that is styled, not styled, positioned. So it's parent, let me get this right. So absolute also uses top right, bottom left properties to identify where its position is, but it is based off the first ancestor that has a position set. So if we look at the ancestors of this particular image, so here we are at explanation. So here's this image. Its first parent is this section, explanation. Its next parent, if we go up, all those sections are siblings, not parents. Its next parent is body, all right? And then HTML after that. So if I don't, and notice that its first parent doesn't have any, right? This section doesn't have any position set. It has no position. It has static, the default, so it's not set. So if I do a top here of 60 pixels, and let's go ahead and do a left, how far off of the left that we want it. And let's see what happens to this. Okay, it's gone, but it isn't lost. It's up here. It's doing it off the body. So if it does not have an ancestor that has a position set, it will do it off of the body. So here it's doing it from the top of the body and the left of the body. 60 pixels from the top, 80 pixels from the left. But notice it stays right with the body. So it's relative to the body, okay, not the viewport. So what we can do, if we want it to be attached to the body that way, we can. If that's the case, you probably would put it up there. Also notice that it's not preserved, so its space is not preserved. Like the fixed one didn't save the space, just the relative one saved its space. So what we can do is we can say, well, let's go ahead and set a position on its parent. So we can do this with the explanation. So we go, and I'm going to set the position to relative, because this one doesn't do anything if we don't put the properties, like doesn't go away like fixed did. So let's go ahead and just set it to relative, and there we go. So in that section, right, in that explanation section, there's a header, there's a paragraph, and there's an image. So notice that the image that we set absolute is taken out, right? There's the header, there's the paragraph, and the image is no longer doesn't take up space in that section, but it's positioned based on that section. So it is currently, let's look and see what the values are. It is currently 60 pixels from the top of that section and 80 pixels from the left. Okay, let's move that over here so we can see it better. Oh, and notice that it moves with it, right? It's based on how that section moves, so it moves with it. Let's go ahead and take it from the right 80 pixels instead of the left. So we'll take it from the right. All right, so that section goes clear over to the side, so it's from the right 80 pixels and from the top 60 pixels. Okay, so those are the 4 position properties. Each behave just a little bit different.